In 1982, Arnold Schwarzenegger starred as Conan the Barbarian, a powerful warrior who must break away from his chains of slavery and destroy the evil sorcerer Falsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones, an evil, powerful cult leader who can summon demons. Conan must go on a quest to prove his worthiness as a brave and mighty warrior gladiator and save the world from the terrifying clutches of Doom, so he can fulfill the prophecy of his people, the Cimmerians, and become the world's most powerful warrior and avenge his parents in this classic sword and sorcery fantasy movie. So today we are going to look at the movie that put Arnold Schwarzenegger into the mainstream spotlight by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about Conan the Barbarian. Let's check it out. Number 10. Background of Conan. The world was introduced to the sword and sorcery hero Conan in 1932, making him predate other heroes like Superman and the Phantom. He was created by American author Robert E. Howard, who was a frequent writer for pulp magazines. Conan first appeared in pulp magazine Weird Tales in a story called The Phoenix on the Sword. The story was originally written for a different character called Kull of Atlantis, who was another character created by Howard, but the story never got published, so it was reworked for his new creation Conan the Barbarian, or as he was known back then, Conan the Cimmerian. Conan would go on to become a popular pulp character, and would then move on to other mediums like books, and in 1970 would even enter the world of comics, as Marvel published a popular comic book series based on the character. In fact, the Marvel comics were actually my introduction to Conan, yes, even before I saw the films, so they will always have a special place in my heart. So with Conan now becoming a popular character in pop culture, it would seem that a movie would be a sure thing. However, ownership issues crept in. Number 9. A Conan the Barbarian movie was planned in the early 70s. In 1970, ideas started to float around Hollywood for bringing Conan onto the big screen. Producers Edward R. Pressman and Edward Summer got to work on making a Conan movie in 1975, but it was a struggle to get the rights to the character. After the death of Conan's creator, Richard E. Howard, the Conan character was in something of an ownership fiasco, with the rights being passed on from holder to holder. At that particular time, a company called Lancer Books held the rights, but that ownership itself was going for a legal fiasco, so Pressman and Summer had to wait 2 years for that to sort itself out, where they finally acquired the rights to the character. But this was actually beneficial, as during the 2 years it took for the producers to acquire the rights of Conan, Star Wars had come out and was a massive hit, and suddenly there was an interest in adventurous fantasy movies with heroic characters. And Dirty Harry and Apocalypse Now writer / Red Dawn director John Milius was in talks to direct the movie, as he had previously expressed interest to direct a Conan movie. Number 8. Potential Conan candidates. When it came to bringing Conan onto the big screen, the most important part of the movie was finding the right actor to bring the sword and sorcery hero to life on the big screen. It had to work and be believable, or otherwise the movie wouldn't have worked. According to Summer, they were looking for actors known for playing tough guy roles, and had their eyes out for Charles Bronson, William Smith, and Schwarzenegger's future rival, Sylvester Stallone, whom at the time had become a huge star thanks to Rocky. However, producers saw Arnold Schwarzenegger in the documentary movie Pumping Iron, and felt that he had the right look for the part thanks to his muscular physique. And so Arnie was approached and he accepted the role, feeling that it would be a great way to get him into the mainstream entertainment, where he had the opportunity to go from bodybuilder turned action hero. However, director John Milius wasn't entirely convinced, as he wanted a more athletic looking Conan, so Arnie went on an 18-month exercise routine to get the build that Milius wanted, as well as training for other skills required for the movie, such as horse riding and fencing, as well as martial arts. And so, an action movie icon was born. In hindsight, it's kind of ironic that there was a slight hesitation to Arnie, as he would go on to become the biggest action star of the 80s and 90s. Number 7. Conan was going to be set in the future with mutants. In Conan's early production days, Paramount Pictures got on board the project, and they wanted a screenwriter with clout to pen the script. So Oliver Stone, aka the director of Platoon and Wall Street, came on board to write the script for Conan the Barbarian. His script was vastly different to the final film, in that it was set in a rundown future, where civilization was more or less destroyed, and Conan must take on a heap of mutants. However, the script caused issues for the movie's production, as this version of the movie would have taken the movie's budget up to $40 million, and Paramount Pictures were no longer interested, as well as other studios whom were approached. Even director John Milius was no longer interested in the project at the time, as he didn't like the script and was having creative differences with producer Edward Pressman. Number 6. Change in production. Producers Pressman and Summer were having financial difficulties in trying to keep the Conan project afloat. What was also an issue was finding a director. At one stage, it was suggested that Oliver Stone would co-direct Conan the Barbarian along with John Alves, who was the second unit director on Jaws 2. Oliver Stone supposedly even asked Ridley Scott if he would direct, but he turned it down. John Milius was approached again to direct, and he said that he would if he could rework Oliver Stone's script, which he did, with the script still featuring Stone's input, but changed it more to be what we would get on screen, with more of a past mythology setting. But also at that time, Milius was contracted to direct a movie for producer Dino De Laurentiis. So Milius suggested the possibility of Dino De Laurentiis to be Conan's producer, as he already had produced several fantasy movies like Barbarella and Flash Gordon. So after a year's worth of negotiations, Pressman and Summer sold the Conan project to Dino De Laurentiis, who assigned his daughter Raffaella as the producer, along with Ron Cobb coming on board as production designer, whom had just worked on Alien. Yeah, look, this movie's production is really long and complicated. Number 5. Filming location. The first bit of filming of Conan the Barbarian took place at Shepperton Studios in England. It was the scene featuring Conan as an older king. The movie's sets and location filming was to take place in Yugoslavia, but there was a fear of tensions taking place at the location due to the recent death of the location's former head of state, and it was also felt that the country's movie industry wasn't equipped enough to tackle a big budget motion picture. So instead it was decided to take the filming to Spain, which would have been more economically viable. However, it took the production several months to relocate from Yugoslavia to Spain. A warehouse outside Madrid was used as the production's headquarters, as well as $11 million going into the production's filming in Spain, including building sets at the location, 49 sets to be precise. The sets used for the movie look amazing and give the movie that old school fantasy sorcery feel that was popular in the 80s. Several historical sites were also chosen for filming, which gives the movie that added touch of it being an ancient story with a medieval setting. And incidentally, once filming had wrapped up, the crew burned down the on-location sets that were built. Which I think is a shame. I mean, couldn't they have at least kept some of them? If anything, for tourist attractions. Number 4. Arnie gets acting help from his co-stars. Conan the Barbarian had quite an impressive lineup of co-stars, including but not limited to James Earl Jones, who played the movie's villain Thulsa Doom. At the time, Jones was getting great acclaim for voicing Darth Vader in the Star Wars movies, along with Max von Sydow as the King. Just 2 years earlier, he starred in fellow 80s fantasy movie Flash Gordon as Ming. This was Arnold Schwarzenegger's first role in a big-budget mainstream movie, so he had to get into the acting aspect as well as the physical fitness side of things. Universal Pictures were also worried about Arnie's thick Austrian accent, so clearly the muscle man needed all the help that he could get. But thankfully both James Earl Jones and Max von Sydow became acting coaches to Schwarzenegger behind the scenes to help assure that he pulls off a good performance. Schwarzenegger's fee for starring in the movie was $250,000, which is insane considering that he would go on to become one of the highest paid actors in later years, with each performance being worth millions. And interestingly enough, part of his contract for starring in Conan the Barbarian stipulated that he couldn't star in other sword and sorcery movies. I guess the production wanted to claim the image of Arnie holding a sword as their own. Number 3. Accidents and hazards. Yep, accidents will happen and are often unavoidable, especially on a movie set, as there were a few scrapes along the way while filming Conan the Barbarian. The swords used for the movie were made out of fiberglass as it was considered safer, but that didn't stop Valeria actress Sandal Bergman to slice her finger, while sword fighting with an extra who didn't follow the sword fighting choreography. Also, a stuntman was riding a horse at full speed, which resulted in him smashing his face into a camera. And Schwarzenegger was attacked by one of the dogs on set. The film also caught the attention of an animal rights group for its depiction of violence towards animals in certain scenes, such as the infamous scene where Conan punches a camel. However, the scene where Conan bites a vulture was achieved by using a dead vulture as a prop. Of which, after biting into the vulture cadaver, Arnie had to quickly wash out his mouth in order to avoid disease. Ugh. In fact, in the documentary that reflects back on Conan the Barbarian, which I've been using clips for this video, there is an outtake shown at the end where Arnie gets attacked by a microphone, where he jokes that you can't even talk about Conan without some kind of injury taking place. Number 2, it was to be a 4-part film series. 2 years after its release in 1984, Conan the Barbarian got a sequel with Conan the Destroyer. Many fans of the first movie liked the sequel just as much. In fact, I've even heard some people say they prefer Conan the Destroyer to Conan the Barbarian. And many agree that the two Conan movies are a great two-parter of action fantasy movies. And Conan the Destroyer is definitely a story for a future video. However, sadly, it was initially planned for there to be 4 Conan movies, but after the disappointing box office intake of the second film, following sequels were scrapped. Damn, that's a shame. The following year after the sequel, Schwarzenegger played a similar role in fellow sword and sorcery movie Red Sonja, starring Brigitte Nielsen in the title role of Red Sonja, a character who, like Conan, was created by Richard E. Howard. Red Sonja very much looks like the same world seen in the 2 Conan movies, and when I was a kid I always looked at it as being like a spin-off movie. However, I couldn't figure out why Arnie wasn't called Conan. Supposedly, Red Sonja was going to be a Conan movie, but it was changed to Red Sonja, once again due to the reception of Conan the Destroyer, and Schwarzenegger was still on contract. I can remember when I was a kid there was a Conan cartoon series, but for some reason I just couldn't get into it. I'm not saying it wasn't good, but personally I just couldn't find the characters or stories to be particularly engaging. But that might be because at that time the sword and sorcery genre wasn't too popular with kids shows, thanks to more futuristic kids shows like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. In 1997 there was a live-action TV series called Conan the Adventurer, which I never even heard of till now. The show only lasted 1 season and consisted of 22 episodes. From clips I've seen of the show, it looks quite similar to the Hercules TV series that was out at the same time. Then in 2011 there was a Conan the Barbarian reboot, but the movie was a financial flop, not managing to recoup its budget, and the movie mainly got negative reviews from critics. I can remember at the time some people were saying they found the movie to be meh, and that they were disappointed it wasn't connected to the first 2 movies. However, the following year it was announced that there would be another Conan movie, which would be a continuation from the 2 Schwarzenegger films, called The Legend of Conan, with Arnie reprising his role. This got many fans of the original series excited, but as the years passed, nothing happened. In 2016, Schwarzenegger assured fans that the sequel is going forward, but the following year in 2017 it was announced that the movie was dropped, but the possibility was open for a TV series instead. But as of 2020, nothing has happened. So in the meantime, we're just going to have to enjoy the 2 Schwarzenegger Conan movies that we already have. Number 1, release. Conan the Barbarian was released by 20th Century Fox in North America and by Universal Pictures internationally in 1982, and was fairly successful, bringing in a box office number that sat somewhere between $68 to $71 million on its $20 million budget. The special effects of the movie, along with its designs, settings, were all praised, but the violent nature of the movie got criticised. Well, I hope those people who did all the complaining didn't go and see The Thing, which also came out that year. Otherwise, they were in for one hell of a bumpy ride if they thought Conan was too violent. The story was also considered a weak part of the movie, but generally the movie was well received by fans of the sword fantasy genre and Conan fans. And as I often say when I make these videos, the popularity of Conan the Barbarian has increased in time and is a fan favourite and has the honour of putting Arnold Schwarzenegger into the mainstream spotlight and igniting his career, which would lead him to star in other movies like The Terminator and Predator. Conan is a fun adventure movie which creates a believable world that's easy to get invested in. It's definitely one of the best in its genre, but above all it was a starting point of the action movie career of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And after Conan the Barbarian, the world of action movies was never going to be quite the same ever again. Conan is a fun movie with lots of action, magic, and Arnold Schwarzeneggerisms. So if you are a fan of his other action movies and haven't seen Conan the Barbarian but are curious to see where it all started, then I say check out Conan the Barbarian, it's a great movie. Anyway, I'm Minty, and has anyone else noticed that Conan is the second movie where James Earl Jones plays a villain who tells the heroic protagonist that he is his son? Weird, eh? See ya!